Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Melina Ghost and I'm going to be talking to you about how I became a new mum in lockdown. I'm creating videos about being a career mama, so if you're interested in that, or if you're even just fascinated about how a family lives when they're bilingual, I'd love for you to consider subscribing. Also, if you like the video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up. So I'm going to go through some pros and cons. I wanted to discuss especially NHS and how my labour went, how it was having a newborn during such a strange time in 2020. I'm going to jump into that in just a second, but first, a little bit about me. If you're wondering about my accent, I am Russian. I was born in Russia into a fully Russian family. I moved when I was 1 to Israel, and there I lived for about 5-6 years, at which point I came to England, London specifically, when I was around the age of 8. Ever since then I went to primary school, and obviously a lot of my accent has changed and disappeared, let's say. No, I no longer speak Hebrew, unfortunately. I have had no practice in Hebrew, no family to speak to, and therefore forgot it pretty quickly as soon as I learnt English. But I do still speak Russian fluently, and I am teaching my son Russian as well. So I live in Essex with my Essex husband and a 7-month-old baby boy. I also have a huge white German Shepherd, and if you fancy watching a video on him, please feel free to do so. I'll add a link in the description below. So apart from that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my labour. So he was born at the end of March, just when lockdown started. So actually I believe it was the week that we were told everybody stay at home, work from home if you can, no more socialising, only essential shopping, etc, etc. I was very lucky that my labour included my husband. I know many people where their partners were not allowed to go in for scans or delivery, labour basically. So I was very lucky, and actually I believe I was one of the last ones to be able to have a partner during labour, during lockdown, so the first lockdown. So I did have an emergency C-section, so a cesarean. It was unplanned, and it was because my baby boy was upside down. Unfortunately, it was missed by the midwives, but long story short, I had to be operated on in order to make sure that we were both safe. I am so glad that my husband got to experience the birth of our child as well, and actually hold him as soon as he came out too. It was a very special moment, and my heart breaks for those people who can't experience that too, just because of lockdown and everything that has happened in 2020. The con of, let's say, being a new mum in lockdown was the fact that as soon as I came out of the C-section, they gave me my baby, they found a place for me at the ward, and they told my other half to go home. My husband was devastated that he wasn't able to stay with us during visiting hours because they were not allowed. However, I was very lucky that even though I had a C-section, I was able to go home the next day. I can't imagine what it would have been like for those mamas who would have had to stay, let's say, 3 days a week, especially if they had a complicated birth. That's my labour story. I can go into details for you, and if you are interested to hear every single detail about how my labour went, what my C-section was like, or how my recovery was, please feel free to do so in the comments, and I'll make sure to put a video up about that later on. So the pros and cons of that. Firstly, the pros were the fact that the hospital was absolutely empty. They were trying to get rid of as many people as possible, including myself. So why that's a pro? Well, that's because I got to go home early, in the sense that the next day they told me I could go. I got discharged. So because basically mums and babies shouldn't be around pandemic times in hospital, especially when there are people coming in to get themselves tested, or potentially those who think that they're sick and that the hospital can help them. I believe that the hospital that I was at as well also had a section for COVID patients, so that was doubly a good reason why I should have gone home straight away, and that they did discharge me the next day. The con was, of course, I already mentioned, was the fact that my husband couldn't stay with me at the ward. I was lucky that I got discharged quickly, but I can't imagine what it would have been like for those mamas who needed their partner's support throughout labour and throughout, let's say, a recovery period that is so difficult for some. As I tell you my story as a new mum, I want you to know that I'm not trying to just sit here and moan at you. I'm trying to share my experiences with you and share how it was like during 2020 becoming a new mum. So let's talk a little bit about midwives and health visitors. Firstly, I have had not a single one of them step foot in my home. It seems crazy to think that these people who help mamas day in, day out were not able to help me as much as they could have or would have wanted to. I did get a phone call here and there and asking me how is breastfeeding, how is it going, are they pooing enough, are they weeing enough, so the usual questions that they would have asked if they came to my house. However, what I found is that firstly, it wasn't virtual, so it wasn't a conference call, it wasn't even a FaceTime, so they couldn't see me and they couldn't see my baby. Yes, they did ask me about my mental health too, but sometimes seeing someone can mean so much more than just speaking to them, because you could be saying one thing and actually you could be feeling and looking a completely another way. Luckily, I didn't have a mental health issue, but my sister, who works in NHS in that mental health field, is constantly telling me how many people might be suffering from that, especially in postpartum. I guess because I only got phone calls and nobody came physically, because it was lockdown, I guess I was doing the right thing, or I felt I was doing the right thing, especially when it came to breastfeeding. Unfortunately, we did have a dramatic fall in weight, so we were asked to go into a clinic during lockdown with my baby. So he was 6 days old, and they found that he dropped 18% of his weight. Yes, it's normal for babies to drop, let's say, 10% of their weight if they're breastfed. However, this was more than they expected, and so they sent us to A&E directly. We went to A&E, and yes, we were very lucky that there's nobody around again because it's lockdown and COVID. It meant that the hospitals were all locked down, and most people were actually calling in to talk about their symptoms, especially if it was COVID related. So A&E wanted to make sure that we had no underlying issues in terms of, like, is he dehydrated because he isn't eating enough, or is he dehydrated because there's something else and something more sinister. Luckily, it was nothing serious. At the end of the day, I think what might have happened was the fact that I did have a C-section, and perhaps my milk came in a little bit later than expected, or perhaps I just didn't know how to breastfeed properly because I did not wake him up for feeds. I also didn't realise that he's supposed to eat every 3 hours. Yes, I knew that, but what I didn't realise was the fact that it starts off from that 3-hour mark. So when you start feeding, that's when the 3 hours begins. So you need to wake them up not 3 hours after they stopped eating, but 3 hours when they started eating. So even that small thing, I didn't quite realise how important it might be. So perhaps with more experience and knowledge, I wouldn't have had that issue. Perhaps if midwives and health visitors were allowed to actually see me face to face and actually teach me methods of breastfeeding, perhaps talk to me and question me more about how the process is going, perhaps I wouldn't have had these issues. However, I'm not putting blame on anybody. Yes, it was me, and at the end of the day we ended up topping up with formula, and we have had no problems since. Touch wood. I have been breastfeeding nonetheless, And I am so proud to say that after lots and lots of struggles, yes, it can be a pain and it could be frustrating, and actually it's sometimes felt a little bit like torture. And personally, I believe that all of my hard work to get him to breastfeed completely and get rid of formula, it was absolutely worth it. It's always a learning curve, and at the end of the day, I want you to know that give yourself some slack. We all make mistakes, and especially those that we didn't know about because of our inexperience. So something that I thought was quite interesting is that a midwife or health visitor or even the hospital haven't actually contacted us since talking about the weight. Yes, I understand we were discharged, and perhaps it's one of their procedures to discharge someone and then they're free to go. However, I'm just wondering whether I would have benefited from somebody calling me up and not even physically coming in anymore and just asking whether he has had any weight issues since. Luckily, touch wood, he's absolutely fine and we have had no weight issues since, but it seems very peculiar to me. Please do comment and actually tell me what you think. Do you think they should have contacted me? Do you think that they don't because it's procedure? I'd love to know more. So in my opinion, that was a huge con of lockdown, the fact that we've had no physical support from the NHS. Nonetheless, it is what it is. And perhaps it's also a pro in disguise, in the sense that we have had no external visitors bringing in, let's say, COVID, or the fact that we were able to bond as a family and just enjoy our time as new parents, make our own mistakes and live on anyway. Before I list out a lot more cons, what I'm going to do is actually talk to you about something more positive. My husband ended up having a 7-month paternity, which sounds pretty damn awesome, doesn't it? So compared to the 3 weeks that we thought that he was going to get, that was bloody amazing. Yes, he was on furlough, and luckily for us, that didn't make much of a difference financially, and we were able to carry on as normal. It also meant that he was able to spend so much more time with Aiden, so our baby boy. It meant that he was never missing a new thing, so him giggling for the first time, him rolling over, and things like that, things that you find so special as a new parent. We absolutely loved being in our own little family bubble. We loved the fact that he was able to enjoy our daily walks, and he was able to help me personally so much. Whenever I wanted to pop to the loo, I'd just give Aiden to him. Whenever I needed food, I'd ask him to make me something. Whenever I wanted a shower and just a break, I was able to do that without worrying. I'd say that my maternity leave hasn't been lonely at all, because I've had my husband with me every step of the way. And it's a pro for me, it's a pro for him, and it's a pro for baby. Now my husband is working from home, and I still believe that we are benefiting from that, because we envisaged only him working from home, let's say once a week. Now it's 5 days a week, and it means that he is able to still see his son during those break times and actually keep his sanity that way, because he's not missing out on anything. At the end of the day, it's not even just seeing his baby boy, it's the fact that we could still spend time as a family. During lunch times, we are still able to go on walks together and walk the dog, and he's able to come down for a cup of tea and just say hello and have a bit of a fuss with Aiden. A big con that I wanted to talk to you about was that we were isolated as new parents. We had no family or friends come to our house for about 3 months. It was absolutely crazy to think that when Aiden was born that we would have nobody. It's just not something that we thought of. We didn't think that that would be the case, because you also want support. You want a hug after they're born. You want to celebrate. You want to say, here's the new baby, here's the newcomer of our whole family. And yet we were not able to. I'm sorry, I didn't realise that it meant so much to me. and that I'll be getting emotional about this. Bloody hell, I don't know where that came from. I clearly can't talk about it without getting emotional, so let's move on quickly in the sense that yes, it was a difficult time for us. Aiden couldn't meet his family, we didn't have the support that we wanted, but at the same time we have had so much to take away from lockdown that we should be and are very grateful for. On the flip side, the fact that family and friends couldn't visit us daily meant that we were able to come together closer as a family. We were able to go on walks together. We were able to sit and cuddle together. We were able to set our own routines. We were able to do anything that we liked without worrying about somebody turning up on our doorstep. I'm not saying that we didn't want other people to come around. I'm saying that we were looking at the silver lining. The other silver lining in this was the fact that we were able to do virtual calls. Yes, it might not be the same as physical, but it was the fact that we were creating a routine where we would call our family daily, where we would have possibly not spoken to them every day, where we saw our friends and did quizzes and had fun things planned in the diary, even with a newborn. The other thing that I should be personally grateful for and cannot believe my luck was the fact that I can continue doing my career whilst having a newborn and not worry about it. I used to go to conferences a lot for SEO, so search engine optimization and digital marketing, because that's what I do. It meant that I was able to continue doing those conferences. So from speaking of conferences and even attending conferences because of lockdown, because they were all virtual. I didn't have to worry about physically being there. I didn't have to worry about continuing to breastfeed my baby. I didn't have to worry about him crying because it was all done virtually. And that's something I am so grateful for, because I did not have to stop my career because I've had a newborn. Yes, lockdown came with a lot of challenges, especially for a new parent. However, there are so many things that I am personally grateful for, because I wouldn't have had those things without it being 2020, COVID-19 and lockdown. Thank you so much for watching my channel. I appreciate you listening to my story, and I hope that it moved you in one way or another. If you'd like to see more of my content, I'd love for you to consider subscribing. Please don't forget to like the video and comment down below as to what you think about COVID-19. Has it been negative? Has it been positive for you? Or has it been a mix of both like it has to us? Thanks so much, and until next time.